All right, let's do this. Thanks everyone for joining. Today's event is Trusted Messengers, Growing Your Network of Climate Advocates. Really excited. We have a great panel set up today to talk about this important topic, and two, I'd say really good hosts, Apollo and myself, Stuart Gardner. Excited to get in and get started. Next slide. So before we kick it off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the two host organizations today. My name is Stuart Gardner. I'm Executive Director of Generation180. Generation180 is a national nonprofit that inspires and equips individuals to take action on clean energy. Our campaigns like Electrify Your Schools and Electrify Your Life drive cultural change. We're shifting the narrative, telling success stories via trusted messengers and creating ambassador communities where folks can learn, connect, and engage. Apollo, on to you.
Yeah, sure. Next slide. I'll try to make this quick. Hey, everyone, I'm Apollo Gonzalez, Executive Director at the Climate Advocacy Lab. The lab is a movement support organization. We're a team of about 12 folks who are seasoned trainers, researchers, facilitators, campaigners, and digital experts who are building a body of knowledge and evidence to help the climate movement build more effective and winning campaigns. Our membership is made up of somewhere around 5,000 members across all of the US. And those 5,000-ish members represent somewhere in the neighborhood of around 900 organizations. Next slide. And I'll just talk really quickly about how we work. We sort of work in these four main structures here. The community that I mentioned is around 5,000 folks. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,000 of those folks on Slack who are doing peer knowledge exchange and supporting each other in the work that they're doing on the ground building these campaigns. Our researchers develop unique research that is done by the lab or in partnership with our partner organizations and output insights from that research. Those insights live in our resource library, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of around 10,000 resources for campaigners. And then the best of those resources that are really resonating with folks become trainings. And we've got an incredible training team who does a series of one-off trainings. And in addition to those one-off trainings, does a whole host of cohort trainings that sometimes last several months. And I think the last thing I'll note is that I'm also an elected official on city council here in my small town. So I have a bit of a front row seat to how trusted messengers work, especially when you are in a town that is pretty red and in a state here in Texas where some of the challenges around communicating on climate are evident every day. Yeah, that's me. I'll stop talking now. Thanks.
Thanks, Apollo, and really thanks to the lab for collaborating on this event today. For today's discussion, we identified three key challenges. Clean energy has become increasingly polarized, and adoption is not happening fast enough. Trust in traditional media is at an all-time low. People are seeking trusted messengers. And finally, we're definitely seeing that policy is fragile. We need new strategies to incite cultural change and build new clean energy constituencies. Next slide. But there is some good news. Most Americans still support clean energy, poll after poll. That's great. And people are more likely to take climate action if they think their peers are doing it too. Really important to have that peer effect. And lastly, we can take control of the narrative, we can protect progress, and we can depolarize climate and attract broad support with authentic and trusted messengers. We have that on our side because people are benefiting from clean energy. We just need to tell those stories. So we'll get into it. Next slide. We'll start with our discussion today and move on to the first question. So Esteban, I'll let you take be the first person to answer the first question. Before you start, maybe introduce yourself, your organization, your role, and then answer this question. From your perspective, why are influencers and creatives so important as trusted messengers, especially at this moment we face ourselves now? Esteban.
Perfect. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Apollo, for hosting this. Apollo, I love the reveal at the end that you're an elected official. That was amazing. I want to do that right before I leave a room. Be like, by the way, I'm an elected official. And then, that's so great. Hey, everyone, my name is Esteban Gast. I'm in Los Angeles. I do a few things, but notably and importantly, I'm the comedian in residence at Generation 180, which means I do a few things like run our climate comedy cohort program and climate cultura program, help out with other programs like this wonderful new program called Amplifiers that we did with Sarah, who's here, and Rewiring America. And that means that I also have my own like comedian, creative, writer, hosty things on the side. Which this question of like, yeah, why are influencers or creatives in this moment? I think what the presentation was so beautiful, Stuart. You laid it out so cleanly of like that we are in this moment where talking about climate should be, there's like every argument for it. it should be a remarkably easy, friction-free conversation. And the reason that there is friction is I think because there's like a storytelling fight that we're really not winning. And I think, okay, great. If we have the solutions and you can make a social and community and economic argument and all these things, right? Solar is the cheapest energy source, all these things. If we can make that argument and people aren't hearing that argument, then we go to people who professionally share ideas for a living. And I think to me, that's what's so exciting about influencers and artists and creatives is that they have honed the particular set of sharing an idea as clearly as possible, as concisely as possible to their audience as possible. Yeah, so I think just leveraging that, it's like, right, it's like that's their skill, that's the thing they're so good at. So that to me is exciting. And then I can like wax poetically about why creatives or why artists, because I think they're also not just sharing ideas. Even like I'm a comedian, but even in comedy, it's like there's a depth to it where you share like the idea and a human emotion, right? So I'm not just sharing that solar power is the cheapest energy source. I'm sharing like, what the heck? That means that our world could be transformed. That means that we could be doing this, but we're not. So then I think what people take away is the fact and the emotion, which is a lot stickier, right? So I think there's like some of those nuances that we can get into it, but I think people who have spent an awful lot of time honing a skill, how to share ideas to an audience, should be given that gift and that challenge and that invitation to share, some of the most critically important ideas to their audience. So that's my first thought.
I love that. And I really like, it's not just the facts, but it's the emotion. And, facts could be boring, but emotion is powerful. Love that. Thanks, Esteban. Sarah, what about you? Maybe quick introduction, and then do you agree with Esteban? Why are influencers and creatives important right now? And if you don't agree with Esteban, then that will
I think
really,
now would be a really
make it
good time to
exciting.
I love a
talk about it.
spicy panel, and I was
Yeah.
gonna throw down some fire, even though I don't want to do that with Esteban because he's the funniest person in the world, and he'll just make me look depressing and mean. I'm Sarah Lazarevich. I formerly vice president of comms and creative strategy at Rewiring America until like a week or so ago, and I worked on this project in partnership with the amazing crew at Gen 180 because I was obsessed with them. After I saw Climate Cultura, which is a creative influencer program that sought to help Latin creators and comedians make great content. And I thought it was beautifully done. Where I disagree with maybe the foundational premise is, this has been my theme of the week, like it's kind of table stakes to get creative influencer people to talk. We've known this stuff for a while, get good storytellers to tell good stories. I just don't think we've been doing it right for a while because we do it in this really superficial, transactional way. Like, get this person to do this thing, and we're like, if only I could get, so and so to. If only I could get Jennifer Garner to cook on an induction stove, then the world would understand that that cooking on gas is terrible. And I use these examples all the time. If only I could get Gwyneth, who cares so much about health, to stop standing in front of that 70,000 burner gas stove, then I would solve everything in an instant. And like, okay, true to some extent, but we need tiers and layers of creators and organizers coming together. So the spice that I would add to this is that Amplifiers was a program where we took 15 creators, but we brought 15 community organizers together. And I think there are two things that I would highlight here. It's creators telling stories, sure, but not in like a, hey, I give you a brief kind of way and you run with it. Like so many times, with various influence agencies, I used to just like never meet them, send a brief, they would put their comments in online, and it's like, we don't have a relationship. And it's fine. It's transactional because that was what was agreed upon. That's not no slight to people. But if we actually want this stuff to feel really authentic and engaging in a world where people are so hungry for real communication and trust, then that has to be built on something deeper than like, I'm just giving you money to make a cool piece of creative because you know how to make this story better. So like what we did with Amplifiers was really like look for creators who wanted to come and learn about this stuff and be invested in it, so that after the first payment goes through, they want to keep making work for us and we want to find more money for them. But if we can't, they actually still care about this stuff and want to keep doing it. And the reason I think it's not just the creators, it's got to be community organizers who mingle with those creators, is because the creative they produce may be slick, it may be more compelling, it may get your attention more, which is so important in an oversaturated world, but it won't hit the right marks by way of a CTA or all those other pieces if they don't have the perspective of all these community organizers who know what it actually means to try to get someone to do something. Because getting someone to do something in this world is really, really hard. And even the most brilliant creative is just the first step in getting someone interested. And I will stop talking now. Oh, I am the ombudsman of Toronto. I'm not. Sorry.
No, that's great, and I love the idea. It should be more than just a cash transaction, and also the importance of bringing in local organizers as well. That's great. Kaylee, any if you want to disagree with Sarah, fully support that to continue the spiciness. But any additional thoughts on why influencers and creatives matter at this moment as trusted messengers?
Yeah, for sure. So, hello, everyone. Kaylee Hyde, she, her pronouns. I am our digital engagement director over at Climate Power, and have been here about 3.5 years building out a program of working with content creators, digital partners. I also do a lot of things at events. I met Esteban at Hollywood Climate Summit last year. So, love to just kind of reach different cultural places, meet people where they are, which is I think one of the big reasons why we should be working with creators, obviously, is like that whole meeting people where they are. I think also there's something to be said about the importance of like this moment in climate and clean energy, which is that it like can't be understated how much people hate a billionaire. Like especially right now, like 60% of the country like can't afford, they're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford basic living expenses. And there are new just injustices, atrocities happening across the country, but especially coming out of like the fossil fuel industry, right? So I think there's a really important moment that we can be seizing on right now, even with this whole reconciliation fight that I'm sure we're all like really caught up in right now. But yeah, I think it's a really important moment to engage people in a collective hatred of billionaires in the fossil fuel industry. So just putting that out there, that I think that's an important thing in this moment. But yeah, I've been working with content creators for like 15 years. I come from that world. I didn't come to the world of politics until about 3.5 years ago when I started Climate Power. So I've been seeing how brands work with creators and on different sides. I've been a consultant. I was a creator when I was younger, and like I've done all the different sides of it. And so bringing it into this political space has been really, really interesting, and definitely a lot of convincing to do. So glad to be having this space with everyone.
Kaylee, I take it you were not invited to Bezos's wedding in Italy then?
I was busy, so no, no, I was not invited.
So next question here. I'm actually going to go back to you, Esteban, because I think Sarah sort of addressed this a little bit, and this is this not having um, strictly transactional relationships with these folks. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what's unique about your approach, and who might the audience be for engaging these influencers right now?
Yeah, I'm so happy to talk about that because I think to what we're all touching on, with Generation 180, we've got this program called, I'll just speak up for this program in particular, but I think it's our approach for a lot, but Climate Comedy Cohort, and it's with our amazing partners at American University. They've got Center for Media and Social Impact, which studies Center for Media and Social Impact. And it is, so what we do is we work with comedians, and part of it is trying to like flip the script on the way that usually people work with influencers. And like usually they go, here's a brief. And they go, great, here's like the talking points I got to do. They'll make a video and you'll go, which makes sense because if you got to crank out a lot of content, that's just the most effective and efficient way to do that, right? You just go, can you say this? They go, yes, and that's it. And something that we're trying to do a little bit differently is, and it's truthfully, I mean, it requires more time and more investment and more thoughtfulness in a way, but it's like bring comedians in. We joke that are like climate curious, and then they come in and they spend a lot of time together. And we like share a bunch of climate info with them, and they organically find what's interesting to them and make videos from that. And what we've seen is people stay involved in climate well beyond the scope of like one video. So this thought of like building community and building like peer-to-peer community where they're supporting each other, they're keeping each other accountable, I think is like a really good model. That's also, by the way, like that's been refined and brought in with so many brilliant people like Sarah for like amplifiers or climate cultura that we're working actually with Haley and like all these different, right, all our wonderful partners of being like, what's it look like to bring people in and build meaningful community? Because, Paul, I think to the second part of the question is who's the audience, is like, I think the audience is one, if you have like an online audience, but it's like the people that you're genuinely excited to tell this thing to. And I think that is what sometimes we miss. I think sometimes we go, oh, that person has a lot of followers. Can they say something to their followers? But if they're mumbling something that they don't fully understand or like believe, or they think that they should, right? That's why like anytime celebrities make statements, sometimes after big world events, some of the statements feel tone deaf because you're like, you're saying this because you feel like you have to. I'm so saddened by the recent news, you know? And there's a way to do that that is real and organic, or like don't say anything, and then when you want to say something, say something. So I think that's trying to think about that, of how can the creators we work with, the influencers we work with, the creator, you know, the trusted messengers, like how do we empower them to in some ways take agency and control and feel such ownership that they're telling those stories. I think that's huge. And then the audience doesn't almost matters less, right? So like me, I do stand up and things, and I'm like, the audience that I'm trying to reach, honestly, is like I'm trying to find like the fun little weirdos who think I'm the things that I think are funny, that, you know, like, and I think you can't get specific niche enough, right? Like I think a joke that I have that is somehow has turned into like a joke that people really like is, I'm Colombian, but then I grew up in Puerto Rico, and I talk about those two accents. And like my parents have a Colombian accent, but I grew up with like a Puerto Rican accent. And if you know anything about accents, those are totally different. And I'm like, there's no way, whatever. I was just in Detroit doing shows. There's no way Detroit, they're gonna get the nuance. And the people who know love it, and the people who don't go like, oh, there's regional accents. And so here I am being like, oh, how do I think about this? And it's like, just if I think it's funny, if I'm excited about the thought of my parents go, ay, Estevitan, and I go, y tu mamá tú qué quiere? And we're both in the same family, that's, to me, so wild. And I want to talk about that, even if in my head, if a consultant gave me, they'd be like, Detroit doesn't have a Latino population, blah, blah, care, you know? And I'm like, I want to. And then it did great in Detroit. Ron is from Detroit. Look at that. So anywho, that's a little bit of how I think about it. Just like organically, authentically connecting with that.
Yeah, that authenticity comes through. Kaylee, it sounded like you wanted to add something there. It looked like you came off mute and wanted to add something there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, I was just going to say that like a huge part of this work is just building confidence in creators. I think we're coming into an industry that again has been doing this for for like decades at this point, honestly. Like creators have been selling shoes and vitamins for over a decade. So they're used to the process that has always been the case, which is a lot of this like push and pull of, you know, you get a script, you review it, or a brief, you review it, they write a script, all of that. And I think that's really, really useful and helpful as well. We do programs like that, and that's a good way of like introducing people to working with us. But I think also what we're aiming to do is build a confidence and show that you don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be a politician to understand climate science. Like it's and climate politics. It's something that obviously impacts everyone. And I've almost never had someone like respond to an outreach email and be like, I actually don't really want to talk about climate. Like everyone cares about this. It's something, and I think this is across issue areas as well, is like people are want to talk about these things. They're just scared because the internet's awful and scary sometimes. Like people are mean. So, you know, people are always, I think creators live in this mental space of, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to get canceled. And so it's like you always have to think about where they're coming from when you're doing this work, and like their trust with their audience, their like confidence in the topic area. Like it's going to be so different depending on who you're talking to. So I think that's really important as well, is to just enable people to feel confident talking about these things without the expertise and like owning it, because I still feel that way. Like I'm not an expert in any of this, but I'm here talking about it on a panel about it.
Thanks, Kaylee. Next question. We'll start with Sarah. I heard that clean energy is unreliable, more expensive, kills whales, and kills the birds. Do you think the climate movement is getting out-messaged? Are we getting beat at this game? I don't call it a game lightly, but you know what I mean. Are we getting beat about telling the benefits and kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
I really love the hammy delivery, but this is such a softball. We are 100% getting out flummoxed in every possible way. There's some really good work from Potential Energy Coalition. You know, people think that, to what Kaylee said earlier, that like nobody cares about climate, that climate's not a winning issue. That's my ad. We know that's not the case. When we message to people about climate, they agree. 89% of people across the world want their governments to take action on climate change. Everybody cares about climate, and there's this pluralistic ignorance thing where people think that everybody else doesn't care about climate. We just spend like a minuscule drop in the bucket compared to what else is happening in the world. And that's not even in the oppositional, in the forces that are out there, you know, spreading nefarious misinformation and disinformation. That's just broadly too. Like we are just, you know, so outmatched. And to me, the amount of money we have to spend seems not all that great, considering like the amount of money it would take to make a climate voter. I think John Marshall of Potential Energy says is something around $19 a year. To me, that's nothing to have a habitable planet, but somehow those dollars have not been forthcoming in the way that we need them to be. So yeah, we're absolutely outmatched. So then this is also helpful in just the messaging to folks that like climate is a winning issue. It's just people need to hear about climate 35,000 times a day. And right now they hear about climate once every 2 months in a quiet, hushed conversation. And all of us are in the climate bubble because, you know, we subscribe to Climate Advocacy Lab's amazing research. And so we think it's so much more prevalent than it is, because in our filter bubble, climate is everywhere. All I get is climate content, and maybe the occasional, you know, like shoe email. People who are like not in this space do not experience any climate content ever. And so if I cannot impress, if that's the one thing I impress upon people, it's like we can never stop. We cannot talk about climate enough. We cannot spend enough on climate messaging, and no amount of influencers we could hire would be enough to get this message out there. And rant.
Thanks, Sarah. Kayla, Esteban, agree, or you're like, no, we got this beat, or you think we're getting out message here? Yeah, for either one of you.
Yeah. But I think building off of that, I think what is also important to note is like, when talking about the money of it all, it's like, compare that $19 a day, compare any amount really to the amount that we're going to spend in disaster relief over the next year, let alone decade, let alone rest of our lives. Like that number is astronomical, that we can't even deal with it. And that's part of why climate isn't the issue it is, and why climate is never going to be anyone's like top priority until it's functionally too late. It's like fundamentally too late to deal with it until it's in your backyard. Even though currently, I mean, it was a 115-degree heat index here in Brooklyn, New York this week. So I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it right now, that the climate crisis is in my backyard. But I think what like a way of kind of getting around that is just showing the intersectionality of it. I think we really need to spend more time as a coalition working with people in the reproductive health sector, working with people in the immigration world, working with people. I mean, we do a lot of great stuff on the economy. So I think all of us are doing really great work in the world of economics and climate. I mean, obviously we still aren't reaching enough people, but like I think we've been really focused on that because we know it's a kitchen table issue. We know it moves people. We know utility bills are too damn high. And Con Ed is texting me every day, like a bad ex, asking me to limit my usage, which is just rude. It's 115 degrees. I'm not going to do that. But I think it is important to tie it into some of these other issue areas and show that it really touches every aspect of your life, and it's going to impact every aspect of your life and your loved ones and everything else.
Thanks. Apollo, to you.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat that I want to answer because I think it relates to this as well. This is from Lisa that says, I'm wondering about the where of our messaging. The old more deals are made on the golf course than in the boardroom, or the contractor who gets business because their van is showing their name, and they work in the neighborhood. How can we make more of our messaging happen in the overheated playground? I think that I just wanted to add this because I just have this like fairly recent experience on this, and I think this speaks to this sort of out messaged question as well. Um, this is anecdotal, but it's worth sharing. I had to get my AC replaced last year. I called out an AC guy to come replace my AC. He recommended what the normal AC would be, and I asked him about getting a heat pump put in instead. And this is not just any AC guy. This is in Texas, in Brazoria County. This guy does the majority of the ACs for the county. Like he does businesses, he does individual homes. And he pushed back on a heat pump because he said, oh, it'll take me longer to get it. We're not really set up to do it. And no one really wants to buy a heat pump anyway. And I had enough education about heat pumps at this point that I knew that it would be a good fit for me. And I'm in the bubble, right? Like I understand this. I've internalized the messaging around heat pumps. But I was able to push back and say, and in addition to this, I get a tax credit for this. I will actually get a tax credit. So that makes the cost of this heat pump significantly less for me. He didn't know anything about the tax credit on heat pumps because he's so used to just pushing regular AC units. So he and I talked about it, and we didn't talk about climate at all. But from a business perspective, it made sense to him to go out and push more heat pumps because then his margins would be better, and then he could actually sell it because folks could get that tax credit as an incentive. And so I think that there is this like we talked a little bit earlier about authenticity and making sure that it's coming through. We talked a little bit, and we're talking now about like how do we get that message out to those folks? And it really feels like it's getting folks to internalize the benefits of the clean energy economy so that we can sort of push that at that micro level. I know for a fact that this guy has probably installed heat pumps or has installed heat pumps in my neighborhood at my other neighbors' homes already since we had that conversation. So that small interaction that I had with him has had a ripple effect for sure.
Can I jump in? Because I think everyone,
Yes,
first off,
please.
incredible. And I think everyone's like, everyone says the word authenticity, which makes sense. It's like the biggest thing. And the reason people say that is we see a lot of inauthentic content, or we see a lot of, right, like random celebrity do something and we think they've got 20 million followers, we should be good. Right. So authenticity, we say that largely in response to what's happening. But the question of what is the process of bringing someone in, a trusted messenger, and having them like learn to connect with something authentically is exactly what you just did, Apollo. I think it's like it's a loving, like judgment-free conversation. And I think the way that we're trying to think as the folks sort of running organizations are in some ways, how do you systemize that? Like, how do you create spaces for conversations and connection so then people can authentically connect with that? But one-on-one, what that looks like is that, right? Like that person is probably getting emails and it has gotten emails and there's places for them to find resources telling them that there's a tax credit. But it took one person having one judgment-free conversation and then they go, wait a minute, now I fully understand this, right? And ask like an opportunity to ask clarifying questions, questions that maybe they're embarrassed to ask, questions that you have, but but life is busy, so you don't just Google or you don't ask a newsletter you receive. So I think that's so awesome because I think the big question, and especially for everyone listening, is that of like, how can you connect with these folks and then build a system, build a process where those folks are authentically connected to these, very important, valuable messages. So that's a beautiful, perfect, like textbook example of like, oh, great, okay. It feels like create spaces for loving, judgment-free conversations is kind of at the top of that list. How do we do that? And how does that scale?
Can I jump in too? Because
Yes.
talking about heat pumps with reluctant characters is my favorite thing to talk about ever. And I love this story for so many reasons. Because I think the one thing we haven't really talked about here is we're sort of commingling digital influencing and IRL experiential stuff. Both are essential and useful in various ways. But a lot of what Gen180 does, and Climate Power too, is bring people to a place so they can experience something and unlock it together. You can conjure that trust and educate people and help upend their imposter syndrome in a Zoom room. But there's something about a bunch of people coming together to realize, oh, all these other influencers and creators also think they don't know enough about climate. And when you see the person next to you being like, I was afraid to ask this question, it's like, it somehow like just makes everybody less guarded. And I think what Apollo's speaking to in speaking to people on the ground is the influencers. We need the whole continuum of, the Jennifer Garners all the way down to the people like me. And I have this dorky sign on my front lawn, not dorky, don't tell my friend Richard who made it, cut your home carbon sign, because I installed a heat pump and I like to help him get more customers and have them know about heat pumps. And my friend Katie, who's on this call, a whole bunch of us on our street are the people you talk to on the playground about heat pumps. And, we are like, the micro influencers of our street. And I think our street, Katie can correct me if I'm wrong, has like probably like the highest percentage of heat pumps on the street in Toronto, because we're just those people who will be like, oh, you're doing a reno? Oh, you need an AC? Get a heat pump. And I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about here, because Generation180 and Climate Power Works on Policy is like really high bar knowledge that you need to make we're not saying like go buy a new pair of shoes, we're saying get a heat pump. And that's a last mile problem. Like even if you are surround sounded with all the influencers messaging and marketing you need, which is to say the billboard saying heat pumps, the person on the radio talking about heat pumps, the email that you get about heat pumps, your doctor saying, oh, did you know the respiratory health is compromised because of that gas stove you have? Like you need all of these touch points, and then you still need that micro influencer on your street to be like, hey, can I talk to you about heat pumps? And you need that annoying person to be like, oh, lovely contractor, I know you're a great person. Have you heard about heat pumps? And I get that you're not interested because you've successfully sold gas stoves for gas furnaces for 100 years, and your grandfather did too. That would make him very old, but here's why you should do this thing. So we need a whole range of influencers, and I'm yammering, so I will stop now.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. Like, the next question here is really around how do we go about recruiting participants and influencers in this? And I'm curious to hear from you all, but I think the thing for me in that interaction was that I managed to recruit an unsuspecting influencer, right? He didn't know that that's where we were going to end up, and I didn't know that that's where we were going to end up. But this guy answers questions on the local Facebook group all the time about people's AC units, and now he's talking about heat pumps. And if you ask anybody in the town who's going to install, he's the guy that's going to do it. And now he's out there influencing and doesn't know that he's out there influencing, right? And there's something to that as well. So yeah, I don't know. Just throw this question out there to the three of you. How do you go about recruiting participants? How are you thinking about recruiting participants?
I would also take these conversations. I think we sometimes get influencer and creator conflated, and like I know creators hate the word influencer because it feels icky, and like it is kind of icky to a certain extent, but like I think this is a great example of the difference there. Last year around the election, I did a lot of work with college athletes in areas that we knew were really important. And that work was super interesting because like they have big Instagram followings, but they're not creators. Like they're posting clips of them playing football. And so I think that knowing and understanding the difference of those and like how those things will then like the takeaways from those and what those look like is going to be so vastly different than if you see like a really like a funny skit that talks about the same thing, but it's not like, you know, a person you know at your college who plays football talking about these things. So I think that's like a really interesting dynamic that I'm always trying to like get people to think outside of is like think about what influencer actually means to you and your work. So I would start there, but also like when it comes to recruiting, I am the worst people can say is no. Is one of my methods in life of just like if you see people who are doing cool things online and you want to get them involved, like just reach out. Like I'm a bit like slide into their DMs, send them an email. Like it's, I mean, just I think it's really important to just go for it because the worst they can say is no. And if nothing else, you're on their radar and your issue area is on their radar. So I don't know. That's just one thing about like digital recruitment, but I'm sure there's a lot of other, I mean, I have not been a digital or a community organizer in this sense, in the political, like formal sense, but so many ways to talk about recruitment.
I can add a little thing there. That's going to be really weird. Not as weird as being a heat pump influencer. Um, I always think of this example of this book by Calvin Trillin, a New Yorker writer that he wrote that was not very popular like 20 years ago. And it's just the premise is a guy who sits in a car parked in front of Russ and Daughters on Houston Street, and people get in the car and chat with him. And what his job is he's a direct mail guy, and he's always looking for the perfect list. And you know, now today we're always looking for the perfect list, like the right people who will activate and be excited or buy the product. And it turns out at the end of the novel, the reveal, you know, I'm not going to read it, so I'm going to tell you is that, you know, all the people who would choose to get in this random guy's car and talk to him are the perfect list, open to just about anything and willing to go there with you. And I think we're always looking for we tend to look for the wrong things. We look for the zazzy creative and, oh, that's punchy. And if only that person can translate their creative zest and their brilliant communication skills to this idea, they'll be the right creator. But I've had a couple amazing examples where it's not about that. It's about where is the Venn overlap of shared affinity. And I use this data point of we did this partnership with Reasons to be Cheerful. And before we even did the partnership, and that is David Byrne's amazing publication of like just beautiful, cheerful news. And even though they're not a huge publication, the people who came from that site to our site, their time on page was like 400% higher than anybody else's. And why is that? Because the kind of person who reads Reasons to be Cheerful is looking for compelling, fun, actionable things they can do. And so the Venn overlap of that person and Rewiring America's mission to like, hey, get heat pumps, talk about electrification is like almost a full circle. And same thing when we hired this amazing creator. Her landscape is she's amazing. She's like a bird influencer. She does these beautiful cartoons about birds, and her name's Rosemary Moscow. Go look her up. And it's so scholarly and nerdy and brilliant and wonderful. And of course, the people who care about birds and want to preserve nature are also looking for actionable things that they can do that will help preserve nature. So I think I've got some colleagues on the call, but I think that it's been our most popular shared social post to date, 3,000 likes, because of course, those people are they have mutual affinity. And in building that relationship with that creator, we had great chats with her. We loved her. The creative is better because of our shared collaboration. And she brought so many new ideas to that work that we would never have thought to inject into it.
Just to say, in terms of finding those people, I this morning was going through every single like big public lands post and finding those people who are already talking about it and like, sending them off to my team to vet and everything, because like taking advantage of these moments. I actually saw a question at some point in the chat that was about like taking advantage of moments. And while on this call, I also saw a Slack that we're about to get more bad news on public lands, I think. So just like, it's a terrible thing to do and to have to do, but taking advantage of these moments. I remember when the sky was orange in New York, all these creators were talking about it. And so I was like reaching out to all these different people who had never really spoken about climate before and being like, hey, you know why? This is why. And just gave them like one video to share. And like, I'd say like 30% of the people I reached out to shared that video on their stories. So it's not like they went off and like became a climate activist, but those little things are important. So I think seizing on those moments is a super good way to recruit people as well. And find people who are like adjacent, but not like, obviously I work with climate activists, but also it's great to work with people who don't talk about those things already.
That's great, Kaylee. That was one of the questions, and also thanks everyone for putting questions in about. So that was one about like timing and things. One question that's in there, this is from Harvey, is about the language that we use, and I'll embellish a little bit, but kilowatt hours, tons of carbon, megawatts. Do we do ourselves a disservice using too wonky language? Do we need to simplify the way we talk about this? And how do you know which language to use? Esteban, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the audience, but I joke. My dad is a engineering professor. He's a PhD, immigrated, and he was in the reason I'm in the climate movement is because of him. He like when I was like 11 years old or whenever it first came out, he made me watch An Inconvenient Truth, which is hilarious. There are people who were watching like Rugrats, and he was like, "Do you understand? This is it." And I also joke that the climate movement has reached my dad from the beginning. He read Bill McKibben's book, loved Bill McKibben, and he understood it. And for my dad, it makes sense. And I think the climate movement it started with scientists, right? And sounding the alarm, speaking to other scientists. And that's like the language that has been sometimes frozen, like scientists speaking to scientists. And I think we need to, there's so many audiences that we need to be thoughtful beyond that. And I joke sometimes that I'm like, that messaging, that campaign would be perfect for my dad. And my dad is already in, you guys. My dad is already, he knows who the UN Secretary General is. He actually read the IPCC report. And I think most people don't know what IPCC stands for. And even now, I would have to think about it for a while, and I'm in the movement. I don't have a PhD, and that is different. So I think there's a way to translate it beyond that and think about audiences beyond us, like climate people talking to climate people, I think in an interesting way. And I think it goes back to that of like, I love the thought of like, how would you explain this to a friend that doesn't know this? Is like if you're like making videos online or something, like if someone's sort of new to communicating ideas in the public sphere, it's like pretend the audience is your friend, right? If you're on a podcast, pretend the host is your friend and you're so excited to tell them these things, but it's like a friend that you can be loving and patient and understanding with. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important to do that and like find what I think understanding audience and being empathetic to audience is really interesting and important work that I think doesn't happen that much. One really fun quick story is we were doing climate comedy cohort and we kept saying, and I think this was even me saying, hey, 1.5 degrees, here's some of the thing, 2 degrees Celsius. And someone raised their hand and was like, okay, Celsius, what is that in Fahrenheit? And I was like 2 degrees Celsius, right? Tipping point. And I was like, I don't know.
It doesn't feel real.
I'm like, oh my
No.
gosh.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, not to hammer the point, but thinking of these tangible takeaways, that can only be asked by someone who feels comfortable asking clarifying questions and quote unquote looking dumb, right? But like that question took a lot of courage in a room where climate people and they're going in it. And so I wonder then, not only do we need to understand our audience, but how do we like build the people that we're working with and like, and excited about, how can we make it so safe that they can go, hey, I have no idea how this works. I have no idea. What is this? Sorry, what is like, and the world is heating up, and can I ask how or what is that greenhouse gas? Is that the greenhouse effect? What's happened? Like, I think
Yeah.
those questions are, if you're having those type of conversations with people, I think you're on the right path.
I
Um,
always call myself a translator, because, and I just quickly, I think this is one of the notes for organizations is to hire outside of the bubble, especially for things like digital. Like there are so many smart digital forward people looking for jobs who care about these things. They don't have to have worked in politics to be good at digital strategy. So I think that's part of the reason I was hired is because I had no political experience. So I came in and I was reading these things and I was like, y'all, have you talked to someone outside of DC in the last year? Like, please, blink twice, if you need help. But I think it's really valuable to have people on your staff who are a little less in the weeds. Obviously, now I'm more in the weeds, and I've definitely noticed how it's like gotten hard. Like when I'm editing things, I see the differences in what I used to edit versus now. But yeah, it's just little changes as well. Like emissions doesn't really mean pollution means something to people. Do emissions mean something to people? Kind of, but not like really. So I think definitely something to keep in mind.
That's also a little bit of, I know we've been talking about moving away from like giving a creative or an influencer or whoever a brief. That's also reason to kind of move away from that or challenge that or like have that be a bit more relationship based. Because if I say, hey, I'll give you a $200, will you just say this thing? And you go like, emissions are heating up. That's wild. Got a heat pump. And people go, what? As opposed to being like, hey, can we work together? This is the things we want to say. How would you say that? And they would go, oh, yeah. Hey, air is just gonna feel bad in your nose. And you're like, oh, okay, or whatever. So I think that also switches that thought of like, what's it look like to have a little bit more relationship? So you can be like, these are the general ideas. How would you communicate this to your audience? And then they can challenge and again invite um, someone to challenge that and be like, I don't, yeah, emissions doesn't work. And not be like, emissions must work. But being like, yeah, how do we
This is just Esteban and I going back and forth, but just real quick on that too is like, I think one thing I'm constantly telling people who want to get into influencer work is just like every single 30 to 45-second reel is not your message. What you're doing is building awareness of like the things that you're working on. So you can't expect every single, otherwise you're getting scripts, otherwise you're getting ads that your organization made, and just go make ads if you want to do that. Like don't work with people who know what they're doing to their own audience. So just that's like a big thing is not every single video has to tell the whole story.
Yeah, and I think I think to something you just alluded to, Esteban, about just reading the script. I know that in my experience, and this may be y'all's experience as well, when you're engaging a digital influencer, um, they've taken time and care to cultivate their audience, right? Like that's it. That audience is their bread and butter. And just handing them a script, you're gonna get pushback from them, right? Like this is not how the responses that I've in my experience, the responses that we've gotten are this is not how I talk to my audience. My audience isn't going to understand this. Can I help rewrite this so that my audience will get it? And I think that there's definitely uh, uh, some grace that we need to have and some I think collaboration that we need to have with those influencers to get that written and trust that they're going to be taking care of their community as well, right? And I think I don't know, I see a tendency to want to drive the framework of the message or the language of the message without being flexible. And it's important that we not take that approach to it. Um, which I think leads to this next question around what lessons y'all have learned that you share about how to get the message out there, and what are any surprises or unexpected results that you may have had. And I'll leave that. Actually, Sarah, how about we hear from you?
I think it flows naturally from what Esteban and Kaylee were saying. It's not just that we have to not use jargon and we have to put things in plain and simple language for people then to pull into their bodies and reflect back out in the ways that best serve their audiences and are real. In the process, this is a plug again for IRL experiential moments with people, is when we do that, we also learn, because to the point of like, my husband just told me I had a bit of jargon in my newsletter this morning, but I'm so in it that like, they say the first 90 days you can't tell anymore. I'm like, that's a simple term. It's a simple term because I literally only read climate content all day. And so being around with people, everyone we met in Atlanta was brilliant, like so cool, so smart, so creative, so inspiring. And not just that, they helped us see our own issues in new ways, because when they reflect back what they were hearing, I was like, oh, that's the takeaway that's most important to you. That's the resonant nugget. I mean, that's valuable for them, because they're like, oh, this is how I would tell that in a community story or in a reel or what have you, or in anything I'm making, in the beautiful poetry that I'm going to present next week at my barbecue. But like, it's also relevant to me because I'm like, that's actually a way better way of articulating or putting forth this metaphor about how the planet is heating, the pollution blanket or whatever. It could be not that one. That's a wonky one that we derived that we built here. But I can't remember the one that it was that something someone threw back at us, Esteban. And I was like, that is so brilliant that I forgot it. But yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, Kaylee, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think I have too many different thoughts from kind of what I've been rambling on about. But just I think what are some unexpected surprises is like, let yourself be open to those unexpected surprises. Like, I don't have specific examples that I can think of off the top of my head right now, but like, I think just going into every interaction with a creative person, leave the door open, leave the windows open, like let whatever happens, whatever piece of the puzzle that they pick up and start with, everyone starts with a different part of a puzzle or whatever, like let that piece be what moves them. And that's great. That's one piece of the messaging that you now know is going to get out to X amount of people. And then you get other people that take one individual piece, and then the puzzle's being made across the whole internet, across different voices and different audiences. And hopefully people are getting different versions of that. So I think just being open to being flexible, I guess.
That makes me think of one more thing that maybe just does need further emphasis. And I don't know if folks here on this call have to, are beholden to really rigid brand guides or really rigid bullet points and messaging guidance. But what I've learned over many years of doing this both successfully and unsuccessfully is it's what Keely said about being loose and open to the process, and also being open to the actual conveyance being sometimes not what you would say. And I don't mean just not what you would say as in more simple, like not wrong, but almost just like a little bit wrong, because the goal, and that sounds wild as someone who's worked in brand for 20 years, but that's like there's this lack of flexibility and rigidity around how an idea needs to be conveyed. And sometimes like parts of it may be right, parts of it may be wrong. And it's about that person going on the journey themselves. And if we don't have a marketing exec or someone bearing down upon us to correct everything, it's okay if things are a little loose, and it's okay if people get it right for their audience and wrong for my brand guide or my talking points.
I think the
Love that.
thought that you
Yeah.
shared, earlier, Sarah, I totally agree with what you're saying. But the thought of what you shared earlier of like each video doesn't have to be the sum of the entire brand or the entire climate movement or anything like that is really interesting to be like, uh, and sometimes maybe there's videos where it just is like the creator or videos or projects or whatever that looks like starting to get more into it. I think like we had someone in our program that I was like, oh, in climate culture, who I was like, oh, I don't know if they're totally resonating with it. They're like going in a different direction. We're talking about clean energy or solutions, and they like wanted to talk about water, and we're like, okay. And then they ended up designing a few other things. They got hired and designed a few other things that were like specifically about climate and right. So I think sometimes you're like, oh, part of the process was this. I think if we would have forced them to do something or really nudge them in a direction where I think this was the first time that they were thinking about climate in this way, and it made sense that they were like that the way that they could most tangibly see that was water because there had been a water crisis and that was the only way that they could connect to that, and we only had, you know, a day and a half with them or whatever, so we're like, ah, okay. And then you see them evolve and learn more, and then be like, wait, who decides water? Wait, oh my gosh, what does that look like? Where does water come? Wait a minute, drought, what causes drought? And you see that step process. But that takes, I mean, it was like a year after, I think, that I someone was like, by the way, we worked with this designer. Someone else was like, by the way, we worked with this person. They said great things about the program. So I think there's also something interesting there. If we would have been too like, no, it has to be this, as opposed to what Sarah and Kayla are saying of like, there's a little bit of a process that like, um, in meeting people where they're at, and that's where they're at. And we
I also
and
think not
yeah.
every campaign is going to work for creators, and I think that's something that people need to like. I did a big campaign last year around like CP2, if we all remember, the pausing of a methane export facility. Like it's so niche, and I was like trying so hard to like break it down to the smallest pieces, but like language was important in that, and I just like I did it and it was successful to a certain extent, but I do think that like looking back, I probably wouldn't have done that as a campaign because it is not the type of thing that everyone needs to know. I should have pulled it back and just talked about climate wins broadly, or like just done something differently, basically.
Thanks, y'all. Okay, we moved into lightning round. We have 1 minute. So this is the biggest challenge of the hour. In the next 1 minute, final questions. What's the one recommendation for an organization wanting to start to work with influencer and creators? And two, if you could dream the one influencer or creator or type of influencer creator that you could work with, who would it be? Sarah, Kaylee, then Esteban. You got 1 minute total.
I already forgot the first question.
Oh, one bit of key advice for someone wanting to work with influencer. What's the first thing they should do?
Co-create the first time. Do not use an agency. Co-create with a handful of creators and learn what works for them. If I could,
Dream partner.
my dream is to scale amplifiers because it's been the most incredible thing to watch the cross percolation of community organizers and creators make beautiful magic every day. So that, but if I had two dreams, it would be to get Gwyneth to get rid of her gas stove and talk about how much better life is with induction.
All right, excellent. Kaylee, number one recommendation and dream partner.
Yeah, I agree that number one recommendation would be to hire staff who know what they're doing, and like younger staff, people who are kind of more native to this world. I think that's really helpful. And then to do it in-house, at least like a small version of it, so that you understand the process of what agencies or vendors are helping you do. And then dream partner, one is like, I really want to get more into the MAHA space. The intersection of environmentalist and a MAHA person is so fascinating to me on where they diverge. And then also more localized community like accounts is something that I've been wanting to do, so that you know their audience is in the place you're trying to reach.
Love that. Esteban, bring us home. You have 15, 14,
Oh,
13.
perfect.
Clock is ticking.
Perfect amount of time. I mean, I think advice is work with artists, work with creatives. Like that should be a part of your plan. And totally, and there's ways it can look different than what you think. I'm literally the comedian in residence at a nonprofit. If you're like, what are ways to do that? And I got reached out to from I had a Skillshare class, and the former executive director at Generation180 sent me a message on LinkedIn. Right. So it's like, to Kaylee, I love Kaylee being like, just message people. Just message, like, work with artists, work with creatives, and it can look different. I didn't know comedian in residence was a role. You can have a version of that too, and the roles changed year after year. I've been on for a few years. Oh boy, am I over time. I really love, this is not dream partner, but this is just, I really love in-person things. I think they're so important. So my dream partner is real life humans. I think you like exist outside the algorithm. I think it's so important. And when you bring creatives or anyone to an in-person space, magic happens. And then you see the relief that they're in person. I mean, it's like, yeah. So I'm so bullish on in person. Even if you're doing stuff online, bring them in person, and then they go do stuff online. So work with artists, in person artists.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining today. Sarah, Kaylee, Esteban, thanks for joining Climate Advocacy Lab, thanks for hosting. And I'm Stuart Gardner from Generation180. Feel free to reach out to any of us to learn more about trusted messengers. Thanks, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thank
Stay
you.
cool.
Thank you. Were you all able to